Hey guys, I get a lot of questions from awesome viewers and students like you. So today I'm going to answer one of those that comes up more than not. But before I do want to contextualize everything a bit. So recently, right, the video game industry has been doing basically record numbers. I think last year alone they did about 5 times the amount that the film industry has done, right? So they're selling lots, but it's no secret there's been a ton of layoffs, tens of thousands of layoffs even. So where are all these jobs going and why is this happening? Essentially, most of this is a correction from 2020 to 2022, right? The COVID years. Everyone was staying home, everyone was playing video games, everybody was staffing up. And the other reason they're staffing up was because the insanely low interest rates. Lots of money was getting passed around, lots of projects were starting, things were beginning to form. So essentially what's happening is the industry is leveling itself back off to a bit of a normal place before those pre-COVID numbers and everything ballooned out. Unfortunately, the consequence of this is that there's now a surplus of people now that have got into the field, that have got some experience over those 2 to even 3 years, and now there's a lot of people essentially looking for work, more than ever before. And just to debunk a bit of a misconception, because it did come up and it was brought to my attention in a class this week, a lot of folks thought this was largely due to the rise of AI. Yes, AI is a problem. Yes, it is unethical. Yes, studios, executives, and people in charge are looking at it because it will cheapen and potentially make things faster, but that is not a direct cause at this place in time for all of these layoffs. And so that's where the problem kind of lies today, right? With the surplus of jobs that were created, there's a massive amount of people looking for work. And when a layoff happens, right, there's a lot of people that have to spend months, maybe even upwards over a year, for looking for a job. This in turn is driving people out of the field for a massive loss in talent, and it leaves a lot of students questioning their career prospects. And essentially that's where today's question came in. They have some industry experience, but they're out of a job. They've been out of a job for a bit, and essentially they know that their skill isn't quite where they want it to be yet. So they're specifically wondering, hey, should I just kind of go all in on my craft and continue to develop these skills with the potential chance that they could get hired a little bit sooner, or should they take a bit of a step back, more or less work a part or full-time job to keep living and living comfortably, and then just use their off time to develop their skills? They're concerned in general that taking a decent amount of time away from the field will leave a massive gaping hole in their resume, and that could potentially harm them as well. So I have 5 very specific pieces of advice for this individual and anyone in similar shoes. And so let's get into that. Alright, so today, of course, I am just speaking from my own experience, and I would just treat it as if I'm giving this advice to my younger self. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. So to answer your question directly, I would keep the job. I think that has to be a priority. Having a roof over your head, having the bills paid, having a nice place to sleep. If you're out on your own, you've had work and you've maybe got a little cushion of money saved up, I would still keep the job, build a bigger cushion of money, and then just work, grind the art stuff on the weekends, or even a really highly focused hour a day before work or after work. That's far more effective. Having that gap in your resume is not going to be a problem at all, I feel, in a creative field. During 2018, 2019, and most of 2020, I took all of that time off. I was a new father. I basically had my hands full, with the kids, and I was learning that whole new aspect of my life. So I wasn't taking on additional clients. I was sustaining myself with mentorships, by teaching classes, by selling sort of digital products, and I did okay. But when I went back late 2020 to search for more work, the gap was not a problem. And I haven't heard of any stories where that was a problem. So get that off your shoulder, all right? All right, so for my second piece of advice, that's time management and prioritization, right? If you're juggling one big job or multiple part-time jobs and you still want to leave some steam in your tank to create, You've got to do a little bit of planning ahead and budget that time. And I've given this advice in a lot of videos, but I'd essentially do focused sprints. Block the time that you have. I would recommend 60 minutes or 90 minutes or even 2 hours. It doesn't need to be longer than 2 hours, because for a focused sprint, you basically want to block out a set of time either before your work or after your work. Maybe if you do a split shift. I used to do a split shift in the early 2000s, and I'd do, work in the morning and I'd have to close. But I had a block of time in the afternoon. I got stuff done. So figure out what works for your schedule when you're able to create the most effectively that you can. Some folks are morning folks like me. Some are night owls, can work all night. Do what works for you, but you have to kind of be in tune with yourself, have a little bit of that self-awareness to make that call. And on top of doing the focus sprints, basically outline a very clear goal for that sprint. Whether you're going to blow through a Blender tutorial, whether you're going to do 5 pages in a sketchbook, whether you're going to start your next project. Whatever it is, each block of time, you want to have something measurable that you can do. And by measurable, I mean something that you can see if you completed it or not, or if you obtained what you needed to. So yeah, use your downtime effectively. You don't need to burn yourself out in this sort of process and the season of life that you're in. You could use breaks at work to sketch or to do the research. If you ride some sort of commuter or public transportation, you could do some research and sketching in there. You could bring creativity into other parts of your life where you're not doing the bulk of that work, but you're planning and prepping. So for example, when I used to try to get my kids down to a nap, I used to look up and research some stuff and topics on my phone. I'd save lots of screenshots or little bits of info, so when I got back down to the office here, I could hit the ground running and I knew exactly what I was going to do and how I was going to go about it. Again, this is going to keep you creatively engaged during those non-creative hours. So this as well means you can also schedule breaks. Have planned downtime. It's good to plan a good gaming session or some kind of walk or outdoor activity. It doesn't always have to be about the grind. Now for my third little tip here is to make every focus sprint, every session that you have count. And do that by focusing on quality over quantity. Since time is limited, focusing on practicing high impact skills or working on specific techniques, through a well-structured hour is far more valuable than many hours of unstructured play or anything like that. I see this a lot. Just students grinding for the sake of grinding, right? Producing a ton of work, but losing focus in that process. Remember, if you're specifically building and upgrading your portfolio, it will not be about the amount of pieces you have in there, but it's going to be a testament for how strong those pieces really are. If you're really trying to keep things fresh, I think anywhere if you're talking viz dev, if you're talking concept art specifically, I would try to have about 15 to 30 pieces total. That only might break down to 3 or 4 projects, but that's plenty. If you're an illustrator, you could probably do a smaller portfolio, something like 10 to 12. So with that, build a good support system. This is the key to really expediting your growth, right? Good constructive criticism. In 2024, it's very easy to get in a lot of different art groups, right? There's things like Discord now, lots of art groups over there. There's still Facebook groups. There's probably groups on other platforms as well. I'm not that familiar with them, but it's easy enough to find a group. I do see that question come up often enough with even my own students in classes, like, where do you get into a good art group? We just got to look, right? Lots of content creators like myself. There's Hardy Fowler out there, Clint Searly, Adam Duff. A lot of creators have their own specific group. So if you like a content creator, if you like an artist even, go in and see what they have. Often enough too, like I have a free brush sauce group. That's okay. That's a place to start. If you want something a little more serious, just for the dollar, through Patreon support, that kind of gates it off, and there's far less people there. But the people that are there tend to be a little more focused, and they tend to be a little more serious about their growth and their craft. That's my issue. It always has been when I'm joining any kind of public art group, which I did, years ago. There'd be like 100,000 people in there, 50,000, 5,000, right? So huge. And when you get a really big group like that, You don't know where the feedback is coming from. They don't understand your own personal goals and what you're probably looking to achieve, and the feedback is very unfiltered, and it may or may not even help you. You can let me know below if you've got some constructive criticism that is actually detrimental to your growth, but that happens much more commonly in a very large group. So of course I do recommend to find a smaller, tighter knit group because the feedback's usually good. Now the problem with the smaller feedbacks is often enough some people are just really polite and they don't want to hurt anyone's feeling, right? So they don't want to necessarily dig in and be really honest with your feedback, and they'll just say, oh, that looks pretty good, or that looks great. The truth is, if you're just posting your work, be really specific with what you're looking to improve and what you're struggling with. And say, hey, be as blunt as you want, if you want that improvement, right? We all got to put thick skin on as creators. That's what that entire last video was about. Definitely check that out. Of course, there are online classes which are great for community. There are one-on-one and group mentorships offered by Brushsaw Studio. Links below for all that. There's a number of different ways to connect with creatives and get that support system that you need. Either way, there are options for all price points. That's the good thing. Now, before I get into my last tip, which is about vision and balance, I do want to talk more about long-term sustainable creativity. That's where Magic Mind comes in. It's an awesome product I have been taking for a while. They're basically mental performance shots. And before Magic Mind, I would just basically kind of overdose on caffeine, just popping way too many Celsiuses and Reigns and all this stuff, and I'd crash every afternoon. Now my open availability of free time where I can be highly productive is now in my afternoons. I'm traditionally a morning person. That was super hard for me to adapt to. Magic Mind has simply made my transition to my new schedule with my kids and my family much more easier, and I'm able to create a lot more potent work, come up with ideas, and basically generate more, whether it's art or content, but I can do so with a lot less friction. You can check it out today risk-free using the code TE20 to save up to 48% off your first subscription. Link below in the description. Now my last little tip here is, of course, to maintain a sense of balance in your life during this whole endeavor, but also have a long-term sort of vision of what those next career steps will look like and how they'll play out for you. So if the goal is eventually to transition to a full-time art career, have a clear plan, right? Include financial steps, maybe there are specific portfolio projects that you want to hit, the people that you want to connect with and get that work in front of. Maybe it's a studio, maybe it's a project lead, maybe it's an art sourcing center. Whatever it is, have a plan, have a list of names and studios that are potentially ready for you to reach out to. Maybe the financial side of it is for you to set aside X amount of money a month so that if something like this happens, you'll either have the money to move, to relocate. If that job, like a lot of studios are closing, right? Like Netflix just closed down a game studio. I don't even think anyone knew they existed or they had one. I just, my heart always drops when I read these things because imagine the young, inspiring kind of creator that moves out, that gets relocated, that signs up for this job. They're going to make some games. They're going to start their career. And then before their first game is even released, they're dropping everybody. And then you're back on out on whatever kind of severance you can leverage. And you're back to square one. So this is why I'm always saying, definitely save what you can, when you can, have some emergency funds. So just to recap here, you can plan and try to keep lists of names and studios to kind of keep in your hemisphere, to keep an eye on for job postings and openings, people to connect with. You could think of it as just saving X amount of money for this or a class of that a month, or you could just simply be planning out projects for the next year. Like, oh, I want to do 4 longer projects, so I'll do 3 months each on a project. And you can basically take the steps to build each individual aspect of that portfolio. So there's lots of planning. I still think it's ideal for a lot of creators nowadays just to not even have to rely on that consistent studio work. Something I learned way back in 2010 when I got laid off from my first gig. And that's to kind of take it into our own hands. And that's what I want to get into next with some of these fantastic creators out there doing their own thing, being financially independent and absolutely killing it in their own markets. Now, just look at it this way, right? We spend years of our lives mastering our crafts, building up our skills in which we might be potentially hireable for some sort of employer to make like an average or mediocre sort of salary with no potential job security on top of that. It makes sense to start to compound our skills like these creators that I'm about to show you to build and market your own items, right? Build your own brand, create for people that are essentially even non-artists, right? Adding value outside of our own hemisphere to other people, right? There's a much broader audience out there, and there's an awesome lot of potential to build and make your own things. Now look at this. This is Naomi Vorden here. This is great. Like, she's making books, she's making calendars, she's adding novels that are fully illustrated with her own characters, her own worlds, her own stories. These are fantastic, right? She's making pins. These are something that potentially could have appeal to a much sort of wider audience. And I think what she's doing here in her shop and with her creativity is absolutely fantastic. You have to go check her stuff out. Here's another one, right? Like Wiley Beckett. She's pretty active and busy. She does a lot of conventional, drawing. And it looks awesome. She has some big clients, of course. I think she's worked for like Wizards of the Coast and stuff. But she's building her own art books. She's making her own card decks. She's doing a lot of things. And that's kind of what I'm just trying to illustrate here. Is like, on a good week, on a good month, these folks are still going to eat. They're still going to live comfortably as creators, not relying on that next contract, not relying on that next job opportunity. There's something to be said about building your own luck in that regards to like just not stop working hard and putting yourself out there. The only thing wrong to do here is just to rely on that portfolio and just hope by some luck or some chance you're going to get a job. Because that's nothing is a guarantee in this sort of line of work. That is a given. One of my favorite creators out there, very busy individual, right? Will Terry. He runs a lot of Kickstarters. This guy is doing okay. He caught my attention more recently because he's building a Christmas game, right? This is awesome. Look at this. He only had a $7,000 goal. That probably means that's going to cover the cost of production. Anything else might be potentially profit. But look at $64,000. He's illustrating this up. He's building the art. Kind of came up with like a fun little rule set. I think it's wonderful. You can learn more about it. I think he has some Christmas cards as well in there. But he does this a lot. I don't know how frequently he's doing Kickstarters, but it seems like, every one of these is doing great. Kickstarter playbooks, 800% funded. Look at this, what they don't teach at art school. Almost 4,000%. Like, what's he taking home on something like this? I'd imagine it's pretty good. And because he never stops working at it. Look at this. Again, look at this here. Just 6,000 for a goal, and he made over 200,000. That's a good year for anyone. Sure, there's going to be distributors you got to pay for, maybe potential middle folks that have to work toward like building and printing some of that. Of course, there's going to be some costs involved, but that's not a bad payday to have full creative control over what you're producing. And he has a lot of things like this. Again, he draws really awesome, simple, cartoony guys, and yeah, I think what he's doing and what all these artists are doing. So I want to take opportunities, of course, like this to highlight more creators like Will and Wiley and Naomi that are just out there absolutely killing it as creatives that are not relying on these companies for a paycheck. Guys, let me know what you think below. I'll catch you in the next video.